Coach, well, what does this award mean to you? Put it in words for us right now.
Oh, my gracious. Just have tears in my eyes after Mike gave those nice comments about Janet and myself. So I just really thank Tommy for his leadership with Dale. And then Mike Lightfoot was my first captain at Bethel College. And I think he impacted my life almost more than what he shared with you. I was really blessed to have people like Mike play, which made me really enjoy the coaching profession. And that it was beyond just the wins and the losses, but to see young people like Mike develop a life, develop their families, and brings you just a moment where you say, thank you, God, for letting me be a part of their lives in a small way.
Coach, how did Jesus impact you as a coach as you look back on your career?
Wow.
Where did he guide you? What did he teach you? How did he lead you?
I could talk and let you write another book.
Let's do it. It'd be a good seller coming from you.
About Jesus. And I thank God for letting me live long enough to enjoy our three children, because now I am learning from them. And I think one of the best things was what Scott did with the JOY, Jesus, other self. And that's really what life is about, is to have that cornerstone of Jesus. In my life, I was fortunate enough to have Christian mom and dad, went to church, and felt a part of the Christianity and that movement. But until we had our three children, did I really understand the love that Jesus has for you and he has for me. And because of the love I have for these three little kids we're holding in our hands, that power that I would do anything to help protect them. And knowing my Father God sent his Son to allow us the chance to see what life is. And when we go through tough times, and we all go through tough times, whether it's health issues, whether it's winning, losing, whether it's success or failure on the court or with players that we do, the great thing is that God is the same, today, tomorrow, and forever. And that balance gives us a great love and a great feeling. Because the hardest thing I learned in coaching, Jimmy, was that it's up with the win and down with the loss. And then you're up and down. And so it's that balance that we try to strive for. And so Jesus really has helped me in my life with that. But I became a really believer once we had the kids and really started to grow in Jesus. And one of the best things we did, Jimmy, was to have a Bible study. And we had a couples Bible study. We had myself and Janet. Then we had an FBI agent and his wife. We had a businessman and his wife. And then we had a lawyer. Always got to have a lawyer there to make sure we're legally doing it. So the 8 of us had a Bible study. And we would meet like 1 month at each home. So one would be at Jimmy's home, then Scott's home, then my home, and then the fourth person's home. Then we would take a break. But we would pick a topic and we would study. And my only point in sharing that is we grew. You grow in Jesus. You grow in the Bible. And I loved when Jimmy showed you his Bible, because I'm always, I need a new Bible. I need a new Bible. And now after seeing your Bible, I'm thrilled that mine's torn up and written on and everything as well. So, but really enjoyed your message. And one of the things I hope you all took, because I'm 76 years old now, and when you mentioned about time with God, I'm looking back and I'm saying, man, God, forgive me, because I have not spent the time. And you think when you're retired as coaches, you know how many hours we work, you think all this free time. I haven't found that free time yet. And now I'm going to make that time to do more in the Bible. So thank you, Jimmy, for those words. But as you grow, and I thank Jesus for letting me live long enough to enjoy our 3 kids and now 8 grandkids, that you continually grow. You never get to that point where I've made it. You never do. There's always something else to learn, and the Bible brings it alive.
So I can attest to that. You're talking, and I knew he takes notes for anybody that's a good speaker. And 2 minutes into it, he's asking Mike Lightfoot. They're trying to figure out, I think, how to get to notes on his phone. I knew those two wouldn't be able to figure it out. So they go to Tommy. They get the old sheet of paper you guys got. And they say, well, yeah.
And he's right.
Scott, how has he let's just say you were in some other profession. How has your dad impacted you as a man?
Well, I think regardless what profession you're in, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all fathers, spouses. We're all sons of God, and just seeing how he treats people, interacts with people. I used to get mad when I first was coaching with him. He would spend more time helping his past players get jobs than us recruiting. I'm like, we got to make these recruiting calls. Now I need to do these. So, I mean, just how he prioritized people and treated people. And I mean, teacher, what's the greatest commandment of the law? Love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I think the neighbor part, he really brought to life.
Coach, what would the 76-year-old coach tell the 36-year-old version of yourself? Because there's a lot of young coaches out here right now. I just want to pick your brain.
And don't give them any technology advice.
Yeah.
Save that for the grandkids now. They teach me how to
yes,
do the
yeah.
notes and the phone and everything.
What would you do different?
Oh, gracious. I think start it with your family, and you start with your spouse. And you talk. I remember when in hiring assistant coaches, I always wanted to meet the spouse, because the time elements that you and I have in the world of coaching, we have to have a very understanding wife. And I felt in my life anyway that I wanted them involved, because when they were involved in my coaching, then I was spending time with them. And especially with our 3 kids, and Mike and I were talking backstage when Scott was out here with Jimmy. We can remember Scott when he was, like 6 years old, 7 years old, and 8-year-olds, playing with the 3 of them after practice. They'd run up, they'd roller skate on the arena floor, they would play hide and go seek, and we would play dodgeball and that. And then when I'd go recruiting, I would always bring one of them, Scott or Bryce or Dana, along with me. So my first thing is protect your family, and it worked well for us. All 3 of our children gravitated to basketball. It was unplanned. I did not plan for any of them to go into coaching. In fact, Scott, we thought, was going to go on track to be a lawyer. And so I can still remember him coming home at Christmas his senior year, and he says, "Dad, I need to talk to you." And I said, "Sure." I knew it was going to be something powerful here. He says, "I think I'd like to try coaching." And I said, "That's great. After you get your law degree, I think it'd be great to try coaching." That way there's always a backup plan, because as you and I know, coaching is a precarious job at times. So he says, no, I want to try coaching now. So we just happened, and this is all with God's time, we had a grad assistant job open, so Scott moved in there, and the rest, is history off of that. Number one, to answer Jimmy's question, is please protect your family. Spend time with your family. That's so crucial and so easy to get wrapped up in our own job and our own team that we do forget, or we take for granted, our family. So definitely take care of your family. And that would be the second thing. I guess I should put it in priority, that like joy, Jesus is first. Get to have a peace about Jesus, a piece of knowing the Bible, and how every situation we go through, I found that there's something in the Bible that helps me get through there. And the old saying, what would Jesus do, is really true. And many times I'd say, "Okay, Jesus, what would you do?" And then I would end up following whatever activity, Proverbs, or what we find in the Bible. I know that when Scott first went to Baylor in that situation, he and I read Job quite a bit. So there's always something for all of us. So have that peace with God, family. Those are the 2 biggest things that I can offer to help you in that growth.
Scott, I'm intrigued by your mom and dad were battling cancer at the same time, correct? Did I hear that correctly? Mm-hmm. What did you learn from that, watching them go through that?
Well, I dedicated the season, like we always dedicate, each person, a player, coach, dedicates season to somebody, and I dedicated that season to those 2, and just seeing how they cared for each other, loved one another, date night in the hospital. I think that was their date night for a while. But just how they, and besides taking care of each other, they constantly were asking how we were doing and worried about us, which all we cared about was them. But again, their love, and they didn't have a fear when you know where you're going. When you know, like, when you watch a game and you know, like, we watch that national championship and you get excited, but I know we win that game. All right, well, when you know you win the game of life and you know you go to heaven, do you want to leave? No, you don't want to leave your family, friends, and loved ones, but there's a peace. And my dad always says, when God's ready for me to go, he's at peace with that. So we tried to tell him he doesn't need to rush that process up when he's trying to play one-on-one with the grandkids. But
Coach, what did you learn from that experience? And I know God had to teach you a ton going through a test and a trial like that.
That you depend on God more than you think you do. Mm-hmm. When he was mentioning about date night, just picture, if you will, both of us in the hospital. We have IVs, and then, they want you to walk a little bit after surgery. So we're walking, and we have that IV, and so we're going down the hallway with this IV in our arms, and that was our date night. And then a couple of the nurses had cupcakes with candles on it for us to celebrate whatever. I forget what we were doing that night. But anyway, that's what came to my mind. So you can be active in the hospital, too. You can get out and walk the floors and try to get back. What did I learn? I learned a whole lot about God, and that God takes care of you, that he is a refuge for us. Many places in the Bible talks about God taking care of you, and he took care of Janet and myself and just made us stronger. And I think what Scott mentioned, the best thing is, and they're on my case now because I'm still trying to play pickleball and stay active in that. Slow down. When God's ready for me, he's going to take me. And so it allows me to be just enjoying life each day. And I think they're going to send, and Tommy or Mike, help me, I think they're going to send you a little clip on Bill Walton. Bill Walton, I asked for 30 seconds. He ended up with 6 minutes. And so it was too long to show all of you. But I want you, when you get that, just see the life and the energy that Bill Walton has. Each day is what you see on that tape. And one of the great things as I've grown older is friendships. And one has been with Bill Walton the last year out there. But listen to the joy that he has for each day. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Each day I get up and I start with a prayer and say, thank you, Lord, for getting up today.
Mm-hmm. You got the coolest shoes, too, of any 76-year-old guy I know. Those are sweet. Those are
a gift from the son.
Yeah. I'll just show you right now. This is what I got from your son. You're getting shoes. You're getting shoes. We can talk about this later. Yeah. Hey, let's talk basketball a little bit. I've never got to ask either one of you. I should know that. Were you on the staff when Bryce hit the shot?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the shot. We all know the shot. Throw it 3/4. Kicked it out, made the shot.
So before you do, my brother and I were so tired of practicing that in practice. We're like, why do we always practice this? We never use this play. So again, shows your dad always knows best.
So was that the first time you'd ever used it?
We had used it once before and did not work. And as even in practice, and his memory is not as good as my memory on this, okay? We'd only practice it maybe like once a week, and it would be a dump. We would review game-ending situations, and we would do it 5-on-0 most of the time. Even 5-on-0, it didn't work very often. Either the first pass didn't make it through, or the touch pass didn't make it over to Bryce. And if it did to Bryce, then Bryce would sometimes make it, sometimes not. So what you saw on TV was the best that it was ever run. So and only God could, make that just happen at the right time. And to show you how intelligent, how the wisdom I have, I thought that another year no one would remember the shot. And thanks to TV and you're a part of that, it's always been voted 1, 2, or 3 by the fans. So it's amazing how that has long. And all the way up until last year, Jimmy, at least I would get one letter from a coach and that had run the pacer play, is what we called it that year, and saying we ran it and then someone would send a little clip of them scoring and winning the game with that. So that's what was really great to see, how many other people used it and were successful as well.
Yeah, it's our go-to. I mean, if we're in a close game like that, your first thought as an analyst is, these days, they'll try to back screen the guy and free him up to catch it, but we know what's coming. We know what's coming. We have microphones for the audience that they could, I'd like to hear from you all out there some questions you may have. We have plenty of time. Just relationships, coaching, X's and O's. Let's just open it up to the mass of people here today.
Any tough ones will pass to Coach and
Yeah.
Jimmy, just so you know.
Did you have a special guard that would set up a play to start the game when you were coaching that really got you off on your winning ways? I'll break the ice.
You'll break the ice all right. I'd like to answer it kind of with a humorous story, but I'll have to give you the facts. We had a tip-off play for Mike Lightfoot, so make sure that you go up and shake his hands and congratulate him, because we had a 6'8" center. We would tip it to Mike, and we opened the lane on the right-hand side, and I can't tell you how many games that he scored off of a driving layup or a long layup or a nice soft shot off the backboard. And so, and then we would pull him from the game because we knew that was the best that we got. That last part was just a joke, but Mike made my life very enjoyable and very rewarding as a coach. And so I'm very blessed to have had Mike and his friendship for these 45 years.
Over here to the left.
Hey, Coach Scott Combs. Talk a little bit about who you looked up to as far as coaching when you were a young kid.
Well, I can tell you, first of all, the person I really looked up to who played the piano is Scott Combs, because we tried to recruit him to Valparaiso, and he plays the piano much better than I play the piano. And so we had a little tug of war there, and he ended up going to University of Missouri and then finished at Austin Peay and had a great career. So, Scott, thank you very much for the question. John Wooden was the first one. I was a sophomore. My first job was a sophomore basketball coach in St. Louis at a school called Lafayette High School, and I wanted to press. And so I read up on John Wooden's 2-2-1, and then I ended up calling his assistant coach, a guy by the name of Cunningham. And so he really helped with it. Then I ended up a couple years later as the assistant coach for LSU with Dale Brown, and Dale brought John Wooden in to do a clinic and a banquet and speak, so I got to meet him personally and got to talk basketball. But the best thing is he'd come out with the book. Help me, someone, what was John Wooden's first book? Well, first one was on fundamentals, and They Call Me Coach. And he autographed it, Always Remember the Master Coach. And that always started me off on that spiritual as a coach to grow in that way that John Wooden did. So John Wooden was one of the people who really influenced me. Watching his teams, but also the spiritual side of the man. And then from there, Dale Brown. Dale is a wonderful man of faith. He's a great motivator. And Scott has inherited a lot from Dale Brown's motivation, because I would always talk with Scott about what they're doing to get the team ready. And his videos and his talks, I mean, with Dale, I was ready to go out and play. He just was very excitable and a great motivator. So I learned a great two from those two were early ones, Scott, that really meant a lot in my life. And then some of you pick up, one last thing. We were at a basketball clinic. This was before I met John Wooden at LSU, and this is the type of man that he was. We were at a clinic, and this is my first year of coaching as a sophomore basketball coach, and the clinic was at Valparaiso University, where I ended up. They had a break. We went to lunch. I was there by myself, and I sat down with my lunch, and then didn't know who sat to the left or right. I was busy eating, and the person on the right says, "Coach, give me your favorite out-of-bounds play." And I said, "Well, sure." And as I turned and looked, it was Coach Wooden. And I tried to tremble a little bit. Coach, I need to be asking you these questions. But that was the humbleness of John Wooden. And so really endeared him to me, and to answer Scott's question, he really became a great mentor, role model for that. Now I forgot what my question was.
No, you answered it well.
I have a question for you, Coach. My name is Gary Thompson. Everyone just call me Sarge. And the question that I have is that you and your son are such soft-spoken individuals, but have you ever found yourself blowing it like some of the other coaches that we've seen, throwing chairs across the room or kicking basketballs or whatever the case may be? And when you did, how did you bring yourself back into that balance you talked about when you were talking about the ebbs and flows?
Okay. In other words, when you see that volatile reaction of other coaches?
Correct.
Good question.
I hope it's because your team's up 20.
Or have you ever found yourself in that position to where you exploded and then you had to come back?
I tried to do all my explosions in the locker room, so only either the staff or the players saw the explosion occurred, but never on the floor. And I would not want to do it there because I always wanted the players to realize that be in control of yourself on the floor. Have the poise. If the officials are problems, that's my job, not your job. So I tried to create that poise in myself, even though you're biting, your heart's pounding, and you want to say things, and that for the sake of the team, I did not. As I look to the other coaches who did that, if I'm playing against them, that's great. That's the discomforting thing. And Scott, I love Scott because he's always spontaneous. He always has a quick wit. And you're right, if we're up by 20, then I didn't have any problems with it. But I'll tell you, the hardest thing I had in coaching was that if the other coach is really on the officials, and I didn't like to get on the officials. I really believed in what Wooden when I talked with him about take care of your team. Worry about your team's preparation. That's more important. Take care of them. And now I never knew what Wooden spoke to between that program, when he was yelling to those officials. I never got to ask him that question. But when I saw the other coaches yelling, screaming, stamping, and then all of a sudden get 2 or 3 calls, then it put me in a position where I felt I had to stand up. And sometimes I would just get a technical if I felt the situation was right. And if you ever saw me walk out on the floor, that was my way of getting a technical. I never used vulgarity because we had a rule that if you cussed in practice, even if you were a coach, you did 10 push-ups. So I never used the vulgarity because I didn't want to do 10 push-ups in front of the fans in the stands off of that. But anyway, that was my hardest thing, was to see the other coaches yelling and doing things I did not want to do and getting away with it and then getting calls, and that made me have to do something.
Raise your hand if everyone struggles with that. The other coach talking to the officials and then they feel like they get a couple calls. Put it this way. Raise your hand if that never affects you and doesn't bother you. If you got an answer for that, we'd like to know. Because I think the officials are human. And at the end of the day, since they're human too, I mean, at some point I know things affect them. And it'd be so easy if we could just worry about our teams. But I don't know if that's always possible.
You do a good job of it, I think, in all seriousness.
That's why we get to the line the least of anybody in the Big 12. But thank you.
And Jimmy, he knows if he doesn't, his dad's going to be calling.
I think it's interesting. You both have mentioned humbleness a couple of times. I can't think of a game that I've done over the last 20 years, if I've announced a Baylor game, 18 years, I guess, that Scott won't call me the next day and say, hey, what did you see? And I think that's I know that's a great quality to have as a coach. I see that in all the great coaches that I'm around. For the most part, they're always learning, always asking, whether it's, I've had Coach Cal call me before, Bill Self, just different people. But I seriously think out of every game I've done, Scott has called and said, hey, what do you think? What did you see? What would you change? And that's a tremendous quality to have as a person and as a coach. So, Over
Coach,
here
I
to the
have a
right.
question. I'm Bill Robinson from Milligan University. A lot of people talk about coaching your son, but tell me about coaching with your son, what that experience was like.
It was awesome. Thank you very much for asking the question. I've been really blessed because I've had both coaches. I had Scott for 9 years and Bryce for 6 years, and it allowed more time into my son's life than most fathers get. So I've thanked God many, many times that I had both Scott and Bryce as assistants. It worked out beautifully. One is that I knew their loyalty was intact and I never had to worry about that. Two, I knew that they weren't going to pay players to come to play for us, so I knew their ethical background and standings. And what I found from both of them, now this was a compliment to both of the sons, is I think they worked harder to help Dad become successful than even sometimes for themselves, that they would go extra board to make another phone call or to watch another film to bring in some ideas about some of the opponents that we had. So great question, and I feel really blessed that I had them. And I criticize my wife for not having more sons.
Got about 4 minutes till we get our lunch break, right here in front.
All right. Just a quick question for both of y'all. As coaches, you're looking for new coaches, so the old coaches leave, they go on and hopefully become new coaches. If there's applicants that you're reviewing and there's no connection with the position that you know, how do you pick that new coach? There's no connection. Not from your inner circle, not from your inner circle, not from coaching clinic. How do you go about picking that candidate?
Beautiful question.
Well, if it's you trying to get the job, and when I say you, any of us trying to get the job, I believe in that book, The Power of Who, by Bob Bodine, and I would find someone that knows. So if I'm trying to get a job from you, you don't know me, who do I know that already knows you that can vouch for me? Because to be honest, I would never, I haven't had to be in that situation. I've always got people's recommendations, opinions if I didn't know someone, rather than just looking at sheets and trying to, and you know what? It shows you their ingenuity and how much they want the job too. I mean, if they're not trying to reach out or get to you and all they're doing is sending in the resume, I mean, that's hard to pick someone based on just a resume.
It's a great point. So if you're interested in a job, you want to send in your paperwork, but then also have someone who has a contact with that coach to vouch and call for you. So be more aggressive in your hunt, that I found out. The other thing that what I always did was that as I met coaches, clinics or games or whatever, and if there was one that kind of stood out or I kind of liked, I always had a file for assistant coaches' possibilities, so that when I had an opening, I had a list to go to. It wasn't like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? I would go to my list, and I always tried to have a top 5 that I could at least start with and call to see if they might be interested in the position. So I anticipated or planned ahead that at least I had a starting point.
Over here to
Good
the left.
question.
Yeah.
Really good question.
Jason Hawkins, Trinity Christian College. I don't have a question. I just have a statement. I've had the privilege to play for both of these amazing coaches up there.
And you turned out all right.
And I
so
turned out
you
all
did
right.
okay.
Turned out all right. And everything you hear is so true. And thank you, Coach Scott. Thank you, Coach Drew. You've impacted so many guys like myself. When Coach Drew, you've helped me so much in my life. Coach Scott, I know I can call you, text you, and I just say thank you. And you guys are such an example. You've been such an example for my life, and you're my coaching mentors that I look up to. And they're always there. And like when you talk about helping former players, Coach Drew is always there for us. So just thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jason.
One thing I do have, because we've been blessed to have several assistants that have gotten jobs and been successful, and I think my dad is the one that, again, there's a lot of different ways to be successful, but if you're a head coach out here, it's so great if you give your assistants opportunities to learn every facet of the job. If you just pigeonhole people to just recruiting or just scouting reports or just this or that. It makes it really hard for them when they get another job or become a head coach to not have an opportunity to learn everything. So that's one thing my dad really blessed us with, is we were able to learn everything, so that when we took over a program or got a head job, there wasn't an area where we were totally inefficient, and from the standpoint we had no experience in. And I know that from just my personal experience, that coaches that come from programs where they're allowed to coach, allowed to recruit, allowed to do scouting reports, allowed to do everything, there's so much better prepared and have a much better chance to be successful. And as head coaches out there, that's something we can give all our coaches opportunities, because a lot of times we look at it and he's so good at scouting reports or he's so good in recruiting, and we just tend to give people what they're really good at. It's important to develop them in every area.
Time for one more. Good questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Ron Bradley. You've seen both ends. You know, Coach, how long did you coach?
46 years.
Coach is a fairly young coach.
I'm not going to make it 46, just so you know.
Overall culture has changed so much from coach to coach. It's a question for both coaches. How do you establish the culture? So much talked about culture. How do you establish that type of culture today, in today's culture?
Go ahead.
Well, it's what you emphasize, and what you put time in is what you're going to be successful at. I know Jimmy goes to practices, and he can tell right away what a team's going to be good at based on what their coach demands and works on. And again, I think today when you've done such a great job, and Coach Drew, and just talking about culture and how you run your program. And at the end of the day, that translates to wins just as much as X's and O's. It's not the X's and O's, but the Jimmies and the Joes, and how they feel and how they perform. And as Fran says, good coach, bad coach, good coach, bad coach, good coach, bad coach, and then you have what you are based on that shot, you know. And at the end of the day, just fighting for the culture, number one. And then number two, the one thing that I've shared with our staff that we try to do a better job with, this younger generation, I think, is more visual, but I think they more want to know the why in what we do than it used to be. Jimmy would say run through a wall, and they run through a wall, the players. And nowadays you can say run through a wall, but if you don't explain why it's important and they don't believe and buy in to the why, I think they can ask Siri and get a different answer. So it's important, I think, we explain that stuff all the time.
The nice thing is, in college, we get to choose who we want to work with. And if we do our homework, and knowing that student athlete, their parents or his family situation, how he behaves in school, with whether it's the principal or the high school coach or whatever, but to do enough homework to learn as much as you can about that person before you bring him in, so he has a chance to succeed in the environment that you want. And I always felt that was very important, was to select the right people. And I found out that you can make bad decisions and bring in one, maybe two, who don't fit that culture that you want. But boy, once you get to three, then those three, if they band together, can upset the culture of the good. So I think you have to be very careful in the people that you bring in that fit your personality, that fit the culture of your school.
I see you nodding. That's Coach Few. I spent a lot of time with him in the bubble, and I know that's one thing, like we talked about, where he had, I mean, their culture's so strong, they can bring in one person, and he's got no choice but to follow the culture. But I agree 100%. Once you get to 3, 4, then you don't have a culture.
Anybody else?
Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
all. Great
No,
questions.
One more, right here. Yeah, these are great.
One more.
Coach Tate Gibbs from Tribeca here in Nashville. As coaches and leaders, we always put the emphasis on the relationships, and really those relationships with our players. Could you all explain the emphasis and the importance on relationships with the assistant coaches on your staff?
Good question.
Go ahead. No, at the end of the day, if you're not cohesive as a staff, I mean, the players see that, just like when we see they're not cohesive. So, I mean, to me, the staff is, if everybody's on the same page, and with us, from the character coaches, chaplains, to the staff, it's so much easier for the players to buy in. And if the head coach isn't treating the assistants with respect and humility, and the assistants aren't treating the head coach with that kind of respect and humility. I mean, it's all throughout your program. So we use the example of tug of war. If one person's not on the rope, it affects your team. So
one of the things, but this is my personality, whether it's a player or your direct question, whether it's assistant coaches, as Scott shared with you, I like to I don't know if delegate's the proper word, but to let them run drills, let them feel a part of it so that they're actively involved. If I find that they reprimanded one of the players in a way that I would have done it myself, what I like to do, as I do for players and for assistant coach, is to correct them privately and not jump on them in front of all of the players. No, Bill, we don't do it that way. You know, I never wanted to embarrass them, so that the players looked as our staff as united. And many times in our staff meetings, I would end constantly with, we may not all agree with this decision that I have to make, but when we leave, let's all support one another so that we show a united front to the players. Because the players, if they see that we're confident and that we're all working together, then they can't divide and conquer the staff either by going to one of the assistants and saying, boy, why am I not doing this? Well, you're not doing this because we talked about it, that you need to be playing better help side defense and be there. So united makes a great presence. And so I always try to do any correcting privately or in my office and just review the reason why we would like to do it this other way. Good question. Excellent questions. Thank you.
All right. Coach Drew, congratulations, first of all, on the award today. And I don't believe I congratulated your son on winning a national championship. We just walked out here and started giving it to one another. But what a blessing, what an accomplishment by you. Those things are so hard to win. And you know how hard it is just to get there, and just a tremendous job by you with your team this year. You know, it's interesting in my job, one of the cool things about my job, in a normal year, if I'm doing 50 games a year, I get to watch easily 100 practices, because I'm watching both game day practices, and more than that because I'm usually there the night before. So I see a lot of practices at the highest level. And to their point on that culture thing, I've seen so many practices over the last 24 years now with ESPN. Within the first 10 minutes, I can tell you what that team believes in. Whether I walk in at the beginning of practice or at the 30-minute mark of practice, or I got there an hour into practice, within 10 minutes I can tell you what that program believes in. It should jump out at any point during a 2-hour practice. And it does with Scott's practices when I'm there. There's a feeling, there's a sound, there's a vibe, there's a belief in how they go about it, and it resonates every single time that I watch them practice. And they all look a little different, but those programs with great culture, the coach doesn't have to come over to me afterwards and say, hey, this is what we believe in. It's like I've always thought, if you have to, as a coach, have a staff meeting and come up with who's our captain this year, you don't have a captain. Like, you shouldn't have to name a captain. That guy's going to rise up if you have a true leader. And I think that's so important to kind of tag on to the culture question that, man, this should be every single day demanded, and not be bored with the basics like I talked about earlier. But that culture thing is a huge thing, you guys. It's a challenge for all of us. But, man, at the end of the day, you want someone to walk into your practice and, as a coach, walk over after 10 minutes and say, what do we stand for? They should know. And you don't want the answer to be, I'm not sure what you stand for, because when you blow the whistle to correct somebody, 5 guys aren't paying attention, 2 guys are, you don't have culture at that point. So, That's my only input on culture is that, because I see it all the time.
May I add one last statement, too, is that I can remember when Scott and Bryce and Dana, our three children, we would watch the championship game, and of course the biggest thing was One Shining Moment and the song afterwards. And these three kids, when they were growing up, they would sing it, they would play it over and over and over again. And I love to leave this with all of you. It was Scott's dream to be in the Final Four and win a championship game. Your dreams can come true. And the Bible tells us nothing is impossible with God. And so, good luck, and hope one out here will be the next one that their dreams comes true. God bless you.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you. Well done.